Joel 2, verses 12 to 13 reads, "Yet even now, says the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. Rend your hearts and not your clothing. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, and relenting from punishment." This passage comes from the lips of Joel, who was a prophet to the people of Judah about 830 years before the birth of Jesus. A wicked queen named Athaliah had seized power in a bloody coup, and she was overthrown just a few years later. Then a 7-year-old ascended to the throne, and he wasn't a particularly great leader. To make things even worse, the lands of Judah had been hit with a terrible plague of locusts that had really destroyed crops and wreaked havoc. It's not an understatement to say that the world Joel lived in was in turmoil. This short book of Joel, toward the end of the Old Testament, contains some very strongly worded, foreboding language. Joel believed that the political turmoil and locusts were God's way of punishing the people for becoming complacent in their prosperity. He encouraged a return to God and said that if the people put their focus back on God, God would be merciful and forgiving because he loved them so. So there was once a pastor at Village, Tom somebody or other, who spoke really passionately about this world being broken and beautiful at the same time. The older I get and the more that I learn, the more I realize that the world has always been broken. There's not some flawless time that existed before that we're trying to get back to. And frankly, God's promised day of wolves lying down with lambs seems pretty far off. And the older I get, the more I recognize the gravity of the broken parts, and the more overwhelmed I become. Why, for goodness sake, do we bother? But it's not just broken, remember? It's also beautiful. It's mind-bogglingly, lost for words beautiful in more ways than we can imagine. And it's always been so. Our circumstances are full of paradoxes. Horrible and gorgeous things happen right alongside one another. When the broken parts of the world threaten to poison our attitudes so far that we can't see the beauty any longer, that's when the ugliness wins. And God does not want that for us. Joel says, return to the Lord your God. When you've gotten lost in the weeds of calamity, return to God by seeking out the beauty that God has given us in nature, in others, in ourselves. It's a return because the sublime reminds us of God's love for us, of God's generosity, of God's creativity. It is a matter of perspective. When we look at the world expecting to be hurt, offended, disappointed, we will be. The opposite is also true. When we look at the world to be inspired, to be healed, to be hopeful, we'll find those things there too. There are folks who are thirsty for war, but there are also people who are working for peace. There are cacophonous clashings of egos, but there are also voices blending in harmonious song. Things get wrecked, but also relationships get stronger. Are many things busted? For certain. But God gives us beautiful things so that we can thrive even within that brokenness.